Thousands and thousands.
Russ, get settled. Sit down. Be
I
quiet.
asked a question. I'm sorry. It was my fault.
Forgive me, I didn't mean to.
I'm sorry. I'm the time suck here.
Okay, are we ready?
Sure.
Ready?
And
Hillary?
we're live.
Okay. You got your
Today's
agenda.
January 11th.
That's right.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We're here tonight for the January 11th, 2017 CIP meeting. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
All righty. We have the Superintendent of Schools with us this evening, Meredith, and the new Finance Director. Lisa, I was going to say Lori.
Oh.
Lisa.
Sister Lori.
Yeah. Oh, do you really?
Is it all right?
Yeah? Okay, and first on our agenda is approval of the minutes of September 26th and 28th.
Who was here?
Uh,
26.
6 and the 28th.
26.
Okay, the 26th, members present, Russ, Roseanne, Judy, and Kyle. So I think we can
Al.
approve it. Al and Jane and Dan Smith were excused.
Mm.
And then we have the 28th.
Mhm.
And we have Russ, Roseanne, Judy, Kyle, and Dan present at that meeting. So I think we have a quorum to approve
Yep.
minutes. So I'd like to get that taken care of. if we could.
Okay. All righty. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of September 26th?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay, and that was Kyle and Dan. And do we have any discussion, any changes or amendments to it? None? None? Okay.
On here.
Okay, so all those in favor of the minutes as presented for September 26, 2016, say aye.
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 Abstain.
Abstain. Dan abstained. Very good. And now we'll do the same for the minutes of September 26, September 28th, 2016. Do I have a motion to approve?
So motion.
Judy?
Second.
And Kyle? Any discussion or any changes to the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You and Diane are willing to do the minutes for all the meetings. This must run quicker for a lot of other meetings.
Don't give them any more work than they
Oh,
got.
We've got plenty. Thank you.
Now, oh, you have meetings here. Is that something you wanted?
No,
No? Okay.
no, that's a typo.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, now we're going to have the school department do their presentation of their CIP request.
We have copies if anyone needs them.
Were you able to do this one bigger
Which one was that?
for the high school?
Did not.
Oh, okay. That's, I got my
Probably
glasses,
have
I can read it. Okay,
This is the
super.
two-pager.
You printed it off yourself, you probably had, I had problems with the printing.
Okay.
But we do have,
going to focus on the 2-page with the color.
okay. We
Yeah.
have copies
Or
if
in your
anyone
case,
needs them,
the
so
color.
leave those. They're double-sided. They were double-sided, yes.
Rosie, I just want to ask Meredith a question.
Sure, absolutely, go
I don't
ahead.
know if you had a chance to think about what we talked about today. Before Meredith launches in.
Could you just turn your microphone a
Oh,
little
okay.
closer? There we go. Okay, super.
Yeah, before Meredith and Lisa go through it, because I'm on the facilities committee, I've been thinking about trying to figure out what we should burden or not burden the school with at the time we're putting together a bond issue, et cetera, and how that interfaces with CIP. And when I saw the pages that I did, it looked like Meredith and Lisa ended up saying, let me break this into 2 buildings and show you over time all the things we're planning on doing in effectively the bond. In thinking about that, I mentioned to Meredith this morning that, just my thinking, if the bond is approved, then most of the things that we'd be discussing in CIP should be done, plus a lot more, potentially, inside that bonding issue, because those are all the capital improvements and renovations. Like a new boiler and all that's included. And so my question to her this morning is, it may be useful for us to also think about, if the bond is not approved, what would be the immediate things in the next 1 to 2 years that said, we don't have a bond approval, but we have to go and replace this and do this and do this, because that's the immediate capital requirements. And then to think of things that may not be covered by the bond issue, like a new playing field or replacing windows or things that may be long-term, and leave the middle sort of alone without a lot of detail, because we have everything rolled up into this bond issue that talks about all the moving pieces. So I don't know if that made sense, but
I agree with Russ. I think that's probably the single most important thing I think voters should want to understand going into this, is in the event that the bond issue isn't voted in, nobody should be laboring under the illusion that that means that no money is going to be spent. So it's really important, I think, to clarify for voters, if you don't want to go for the big enchilada, here's what it's going to look like for the next 5 years. $1 million here, $500,000 there, $750,000 there.
I think that's kind of feasible maybe for the elementary school, but I don't see that being feasible for the high school, except for maybe the boiler, because that's such a big project. It has to be done sequential in those two time frames that you mentioned. So I really don't see that happening with the junior, senior high school. I do see the possibility of it with the elementary school, the way that would be set up, because I think they could do construction, because it's mostly additions. So they could do that and then do the interior work, the retro to the interior, once the additions are done in the summertime. That should be enough time. So I don't know that even the request for the junior, senior high school additions and renovations, and you're talking about $1,700,000 a year for 30 years? For 30 years. So I don't know if that's feasible. A lot can happen in 30 years.
Right.
So.
Well, and so my thinking was, instead of trying to press the school to say, break apart this bonding issue that covers 2 schools and has a 3-year phasing plan into, let's not have us start to quibble, do you do in the 3rd year this part of the expansion in this school, and just say, what are we facing in the next couple of years? What may not be covered by the bond in the future that we should think about? Let's not make a huge amount of effort of trying to break up all those pieces in a meaningful way now. If the bond passes, then we'll work on CIP of what's not included. If the bond doesn't pass, I think we have an enormous amount of work to do, and so does the school, on how to stage this. But to put that burden on them now, to have, engineers come in and...
No, not at this stage. It's
that was
timing.
my thinking.
And basically, too, Meredith, we have all seen the PowerPoint, some 2 and 3 times. So and I think the public is well aware of it too. So I don't know that we have to go through that. But
no,
what
I'm not even plugged in at this point.
Okay.
I'm operating under that assumption that you
Okay.
don't want to back through it. I do have it here in case there are questions that people want to refer to.
Visuals, so I love to see. Happy with whatever you choose.
Okay. So, as we've gone through this process, Lisa and I sat down with Diane after your last meeting, really to make sure we were understanding your last non-meeting, I guess, where we walked through the presentation, just to better understand, I think, the process. I think as we'd entered into it, as you know, there are a lot of moving parts and pieces, and this is a big project for the community to consider. So as you see in the proposal, obviously what we did was kind of look at what are the total bond costs related to the project, break them out for the high school and the elementary, junior, senior high school and the elementary school. Those are broken out on the 2 pages. And to be clear, this is the recommendation of the facilities committee and of the school board at this point. So this is the proposed bond, and so we've followed that in breaking that out. And that encompasses sort of meeting all of the needs, as Russ points out, phased in over a 3-year period with the intent that those major infrastructure needs would last conceivably 30-plus years. That's the life expectancy typically of your boiler system, your air handler system, those pieces that are currently at the end of their useful life, really in both of our buildings. So in thinking about Russ's question, and this has been a topic of discussion, as you can imagine, with the facilities committee and board as well. I really looked at sort of what are the needs of both buildings, and by building, kind of put them in order of what are those safety and security needs, moving into what are the space programmatic needs that we have, and what are just sort of working through in that with that frame of reference. So, at the elementary school, to your point, Roseanne, we would need to update sprinkler coverage to meet code requirements. So that to me is a non-negotiable. The mechanical, electrical, and plumbing upgrades that we talked about, those are a need that are upon us. We had repair people in during Christmas vacation because our boiler was down, and we had.
That's at the elementary as well.
That's at the elementary. So those are not insignificant, and as I've probably said to you before, I know I've said it in other settings before. You don't want to just bring in a boiler if you're not improving the quality of the air handlers that are helping move the heat through the system. It just doesn't. It's not going to solve your challenges.
Right.
Correct.
Security upgrades. So we've talked about the challenges with the main entrance and the fact that that really isn't a secured. We don't have a secured vestibule that parents enter directly into the main office, are screened, or any visitor to the school before they move into the building. So those were sort of the 3 top sort of quickly upon us areas, I think. And the police chief was at the last school board meeting talking about safety and security. It's a concern for him as well. Classrooms out of the portables. So if that doesn't happen, and you talk about sort of phasing that, if we don't do that addition, we know that those modular buildings are going to require continued upkeep. We've had to replace the roof on one of those this winter already. That sort of wear and maintenance will continue. That modular buildings are a significant maintenance challenge, and in speaking with our code enforcement officer, he is convinced that we will have continued repair and maintenance challenges with those buildings.
Is there security in the portal?
So the doors are locked during the day. There's a keypad entrance, so staff have a key card that they swipe to be able to go in and out of the building, but it is disconnected from the main building. So someone could go to the doors of that building.
It's like a large detached garage.
Exactly.
If you were
It would not be
about a
that
home.
difficult to
Right, no,
reach
I
if
know.
someone intended to. The other significant issue there is the bus and car drop-off separation. It is a significant safety issue, particularly in the winter months as there's that commingling of traffic. So, again, could this be done in a piecemeal way? Certainly, and these are the pieces. To be very clear, I can't tell you exactly how that would be phased and what it would be different bonding requests over time to come back and do these. If you're doing the bus and car drop-off separation at the elementary school separately from the site work that you're doing at the junior, senior high school, you're looking at additional costs because you've got somebody else coming into the project, you're bidding them separately. That's also true of, you have to update sprinkler coverage at one building. We have to update the sprinkler layout at the junior, senior high. If you parse those into two separate projects, you're bidding them at two different times, there are going to be increased costs for those. So I don't have cost estimates associated with these because it would be going back to our architects and engineers to lay out how do we approach this in a thoughtful way. And if the bond doesn't pass, that would be the next step, and it would be coming back to you with plans of how we would do this over time.
Now, also, under the elementary needs, everything listed here, all these bullet points, basically, that's all included in the 10 million and change. So
That
this is, you didn't leave anything, okay. And
There
we-
may be some things that aren't on the list, but again, if I
Okay.
look at, the nurse's office, that to me is a health issue for us that needs to be addressed. What I did was try to lay out some of those needs more or less in how we might need to approach them if we were prioritizing, if we had to make those kinds of decisions. But that's not from a construction point of view, that's from a fire and life safety and programmatic point of view.
How would special needs be handled?
We'd be continuing to face the same challenges we face today, that we are providing some intervention services in the cafeteria, that we are working in undersized spaces as we are currently, that we are, we have limited privacy for students when, they may need toileting or
Right.
feeding tubes, or other health needs attended to. I mean, those are we would be living with
Right.
those until we were able to address those pieces.
Having to walk 200 yards to a bathroom, those things. There's
Mike.
limited bathroom facilities for both the adults and the kids. Oh, sorry.
Speaking to your mic,
sorry.
everybody. Thank you.
Also have a cold. so-
We must keep Hillary happy.
At the junior, senior high school, again, beginning to me with those fire and life safety pieces. So new fire alarm panel along with the mechanical, which is that boiler room piece most significantly, and the electrical. We need to add code-required restrooms, and, if it's 200 yards at the elementary school, it's at least that at the junior, senior high school. I had someone come in at the end of the day today, making a delivery, needed to know where the restroom was. And he was like, "Why are we still walking? We haven't got there yet." It's really in the center of the building, and that's a
Wow.
long way from where our entrance is located. And again, right now, not only do we not meeting code with the number of restrooms that we have in the building, but we are commingling sixth graders with seniors, which, that might happen in your household, but it's probably not what we would feel most comfortable with on a regular basis for our young people. Sprinkler layout it really is not efficiently run, and that impacts the tie-ins to throughout the building. We have separate detached shutoffs for sprinkler. It's not an easy layout. Again, security needs around the main entrance not being at the front of the building. And the bus and car drop-off. Again, I see people pull around. Cars are waiting to pick up their children. You've got people pulling around them on the other side. It's not ideal to have those commingling. Asbestos abatement, that's an ongoing project for us at the junior, senior high. Again, to your point, Roseanne, that's all built into the bond proposal, but if the bond doesn't pass, it's gonna have to be sort of chunked out. And when we know for program needs that we need to make some renovations to some of those spaces to improve layout and flow and classroom size, do you want to be opening up the ceilings multiple times or
Right.
taking up those floor tiles at multiple times? So, wall insulation and windows. So in that building, we have some pretty aged pieces that are not energy efficient, so those upgrades as well.
Do those windows fall into the same category that we discussed at the last meeting?
They
that
do not.
Okay.
These are
Ancient.
ancient.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you would get, what's the payback period for the windows?
I believe it's in the 10 to 15-year range for those windows. It's about twice that of what we had, it's about twice the elementary, so I believe they're about 10.
The
'cause
elementary was 20.
were 20, so I believe they're 10.
So in looking, as you talked about the elementary school, and I wasn't, at least the first three, if not the first four, you'd group as fire, life, safety?
I do. I mean, the classrooms out of the portables, it's a safety and security issue, but it's also an ongoing maintenance issue. I think that's the wrestling. I mean, it's not imminent, those ceilings aren't collapsing, but if we're looking long-term, it's at safety and security.
Right, certainly the
On the
first
short
three, the fourth one there would say we may have to build some classroom space.
Correct.
If I looked, and I don't want to squish you too much
you're
into
not.
a category.
But I
The
would
other
agree, it's
ones
the-
require some construction and phasing and stuff, at least in the elementary school. If I got down to the high school, I'd say it looks like at least the first three would be the same,
Yeah, and I would say the first
and maybe
four.
the fourth
Yep.
would be redoing the security
Yep.
setup
And
in
again,
front.
the bus and car drop-off in both buildings really floats pretty high on my list, being there at pickup and drop-off times. I'm not a traffic expert, I'm not a police officer, but I know that there's a risk for children moving in front of vehicles. And I actually heard recently about a staff member who was struck by a student coming home from an activity at a school in another district. And, I felt for them because I can see those things happening.
So fair to say, as independent projects, in the next year to 2 years, we'd have to face off against the top 3 or 4 of each of these. The rest may be longer phased-in things if the bond isn't approved. but-
Correct.
Okay.
But I haven't put a cost there because depending on how far out you go with those, we're looking at escalation costs already related to the bond.
A question about the portables?
Yes.
Are they, assume that they're owned, correct?
We are
Leased?
still paying off the second one. One is owned outright. We're still paying for the second one. We're in our third of 5 years
That was
of
for
those
the-
payments.
Okay.
Modulars.
One of the modulars.
Yeah,
okay.
they're on dollar purchase option leases, so effectively, we own.
Yeah, they are leased to own.
And what is the cost for new? Any idea?
So 56. They were paying about $56,000 a year, so, they're $250,000
5 years?
purchases.
Oh, okay.
That's with the financing and stuff.
Correct.
Right.
That's right. That's with the
Unfortunately, in
interest.
leasing, you never exactly know what the building costs versus all the other rates that are.
But let's get an idea. So,
Yeah.
Just
Compound.
briefly, on the back of that sheet, again, the bond is intended to encompass all of the major foreseeable needs for the next 30 to 50 years. But we have other things that are part of our ongoing replacement cycle, furniture being one of those, right? We've got a little bit of furnishing cost built into the bond, but certainly not all of it. Your furniture lifespan is, 15 to 20 years, depending on what it is. Again, we've got some furniture that is vintage. I don't want to lose my term. So that's something that we'd be continuing to look at. Carpeting at the elementary school. While we've moved to tile gradually, we have carpets that, again, were last replaced 15 years ago. Those are going to be due for replacement and/or conversion to tile, so those would be phased out over time.
But again, not part of what's currently in the bonding proposal.
That is correct, because they are not in spaces that are proposed to be touched, and so
Right.
those are just part of our typical ongoing capital cost. I've listed a facilities vehicle for the school department. So right now, our custodians use their personal vehicles if we need to move things because we don't have a utility vehicle for the school. While the town plows for us, and we're very grateful for that, they can't do all of the little ins and outs that need to be done around the boiler rooms, for example, or the
Yeah.
little walkways. So we're looking at potentially moving forward a purchase of a tractor. We pay to have some folks come in to do some mowing for us outside of our contract, outside of our work with the town. We believe in the long run, it would be cheaper for us to purchase our own vehicle in order to be able to meet those needs.
Is this vehicle, you mean a truck or just the tractor?
So we've been talking about a tractor, but we could probably at some point use both. And that's a conversation about, that involves further conversation with the town about what needs they might be able to help us meet.
Yeah, and I would hope, but I don't know where it's going to go, that if building maintenance gets put together for the town and the school together, which I think is one of the proposals that's being thought about, that maybe the school as a separate entity purchasing vehicles versus being able to use some of the services and vehicles that the town has to do some of these things may be a way to have some efficiency. So that's another thing that's going on. I don't know what shape it'll take over time, but it may prevent us from duplicating equipment because of two entities.
That's correct, and that's why that's something you're not seeing in a proposal from us today, because that's still under exploration. The elementary school window replacement, again, that's an ongoing cost for us. So if the seal fails, we're going to replace the window, but it's budgeting for those, capital needs that arise over time.
Now, the elementary school, that was the 20-year
That's
payback.
Correct.
So,
but
if the
that changes if the seal fails on a window, and it's the older glass, that at that point replacement becomes more cost effective because we're losing energy as a result of that. So it's not ripping them all out at one time.
You
but
couldn't
it's
just
replacing
replace
them.
the seal on it.
Um,
You're talking about the gasket around the window?
I am. The conversations I've had, the recommendation was at that point, it's worth replacing them because you're already.
There's a layer of gas in between, correct?
If gasket fails.
It's a project.
Hmm?
It's a project. It's a project.
Yeah.
Replacement windows are typically an easier, less expensive approach than some of those repairs, according to the people that we've talked with.
It was having a square peg in a square hole, and when you remove it, it's like fitting a round peg in a square hole. It never quite. It's close.
Triangle
For the
rhombus.
vehicle, you said a tractor and possibly a truck. Was there something else?
No,
Okay.
no. I think the tractor would be the one we would prioritize.
And then where would you house it?
In the maintenance shed.
The maintenance shed that's there. Okay. That you have to, if you do the renovations, you have to get rid of that maintenance shed.
It will be moved across the street onto the Carpenter
Okay, so it
property.
is movable, because I heard somewhere that they were gonna, it would be demolished during the move and stuff like that.
That's
Oh,
not intended to be demolished.
Good.
There are sheds at the elementary school that will remain as well, but it will be relocated.
Okay. Additional code. Now, are all the updated sprinkler at the junior, senior high, wasn't that done with the last fire and life safety code?
It was done in those areas that were being addressed as part of that. There is
Okay.
sprinkler in the building, but the layout, we haven't fixed all of the ins and outs. We just addressed it in those areas where they fixed the stairwells and the gymnasium area, elevator area.
So, Diane, any
I just
suggestions
wanna
or
say, what I'm
comments?
hearing Meredith say is if this work is done as a comprehensive package through the bond issue, it is going to result in much greater efficiencies and lower costs over time because of the way it's planned and organized, sequenced, and because of all the work that's been done thus far. And that there would be, conversely, if it was done on an incremental basis, addressing the first 4 or 5 items on the list over the next 4 or 5 years, it would require additional engineering, additional study, consideration of sequencing, duplicative bonding, and so forth. So what I'm hearing is, for the voters, that to go with the comprehensive package is the best option as far as cost savings to the town and doing it in the most efficient way. Am I surmising that correctly? And does everyone agree?
Now, also,
sense.
what
Agree.
else do you have? Do you have any of these items that, for future CIP considerations, are any of these as a warrant article, any other warrant articles this year, just the 2 school renos?
Correct. And I'm, again, furniture replacement, I'm not seeing that as a warrant article. To me, good stewardship is you replace X number of classrooms a year as a part of your operating budget and you're addressing those. But they are capital needs because they are furniture and fixtures. And so do they exceed $10,000 at a time? usually know you're in that $10,000 to $15,000 range for furniture replacement to get, 2 classrooms worth of chairs and desks. Replacement of carpeting in the elementary school, again, it would be, built into our operating budget. We're doing, 2 rooms a year over,
Right. Now, do you have any money already set aside for this, for the future, for the furniture replacement?
So our
side?
operating budget already includes a replacement furniture line.
Okay.
That is part of that. So it's again, you build out over a 15-year cycle in an elementary school, where we have 30 classrooms. If we do 2 a year, then we're replacing that furniture over a 15-year cycle. That might get pushed to a 20-year cycle, right? Those are the judgments that school boards and communities make. But that's what you put into your plan. You lay that all out. Similarly with the carpeting and tile replacement. That's just the good stewardship that accompanies taking care of your facilities.
But as the school operates, you build it into your operating budget and then would plan on actually spending that this year.
That's correct.
Where in the town, when we talk about a regular replacement of an asset over time, they have it in the operating budget, but as a contribution to the CIP, to a capital account,
Yeah,
to
but I
then
think
be
you
used.
have different, you don't put in your capital improvement replacement of the desk for the town planner, right? That's not in your CIP budget, that's in the town's operating budget. The
Right.
school's operating budget, we have very few assets that are big ticket assets, very few. It's boilers, it's air handlers, it's those
Yeah.
long-lived equipment pieces. And again, if we add in a vehicle at some point, that's another, piece of equipment that would last a longer period of time. Floor burnishers, those are 5 to 10 year typically pieces of equipment. We always try to prolong the life out of them, but they are not $10,000 pieces of equipment. They are, $3,000 to $5,000.
And if you wanted to build a capital fund for furniture replacement, you would have to do it by warrant
That's
article.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the school, we fund through a separate warrant article, the money that goes into the capital reserve. Where in the town, you're building it in and funding it that way.
And it would have to be year by year. So in theory, if you said, I have $20,000 in an operating budget for furniture every year, but I'd really rather handle it as a capital fund, let's contribute 20,000 to it each year out of each warrant article, and then use it as we need it. It may be 10,000 this year, 25 next year. You'd have to have a warrant article every year for every capital fund.
Yeah, and we have a number of capital reserves, and we look to say, okay, we want our technology fund, for example, to get to a certain amount, and then we may realign that money, and, okay, now we'll start funding the special ed, and then we'll fund this. So then year over year, it's not a difference in what's being funded. So to the taxpayers, it's a flat amount. Also, I just want to, it is one warrant article for both buildings, so it's one warrant.
Yeah, you just
Wait.
separated it here for
Yeah,
for
yeah,
the sake
so
of the
just
CIP.
The way it's,
Yeah,
I
requirements.
just wanted to make sure. And then also, I think what we'll see is some cost avoidance and realignment of some of the repair and maintenance as we have facilities that are upgraded. I would think there might be some realignment of budget as well, so. So there is some money that we're spending now that we will probably avoid having to spend in the future. Significant repair and maintenance costs. I think that should
Okay.
be noted as well.
I mentioned the elementary boiler, the modular roof as another example. I was at the junior, senior high school today. I was in the boiler room. Pump 4 the seal has failed, so we have to shut off pump 4, which is going to overtax some of the other pumps in the short term. We're lucky it was a warm day.
Yeah.
We're lucky tomorrow will be a warm day, but, we've got repair people coming in to replace the seal. I mean, it's an ongoing.
Now, what's the cost of the replacement of that boiler?
So it's not just the boiler. The boiler itself, you're looking at $250,000 probably. It's also the boiler room, but it's demoing the existing boiler room.
So that has a project.
Yeah.
So you have to
You
demo,
can't fit it,
rebuild.
upgraded thing in where it is, and then you're talking about all the connections as well. So-
Right. So, I mean, the boiler itself, you're between, I would say you're $750,000 with the room and the boiler and the demo, but then figuring out how how we work with the existing connections and the current air handlers and ductwork that are significant, in need
You're
of
sending
significant
more
upgrades.
efficient stuff through a system that can't handle it, it's gonna, it just won't work.
I mean, I learned, you know,
Yeah, I
that we have, you know, oh boy, why are some of our elementary school energy costs so low? I mean, I'm grateful that our energy costs are low, but it looks way out of whack. Well, that's partly because the air handlers are working so poorly, that they have been shut off at times so you're not getting the air exchange that you're supposed to have to keep things functioning.
Yeah.
So it's it's a mess.
And what would do you have any idea what the air handlers would cost?
So again, it's about $250,000 for those
For
units.
that, so
to
about $1
replace
million
those.
to do the demo, the new room, the boilers.
But that doesn't include the ductwork,
Yeah, I don't-
some of which needs to be rerun because those connections are not as you might put them in today in the different pieces of the building.
Any feeling on, like, controls, zoning, thermostats?
So that's why
Those
you would
are-
have to redo, that. It's similar to the sprinkler, right? It's not, so we have, in the new area, we've got easy zone control. We don't have that same capacity in other parts of the building because it was put together in a very piecemeal way. And so when you're trying to maintain energy efficiency, if you can't regulate certain zones because the air handlers don't work or things aren't feeding the way they're supposed to, it's not a good investment of dollars.
Now, Lisa, do you happen to have a list of what's in the existing funds? And did you weren't they gonna get rid of one or two of the funds? Didn't we talk about that last year? They were gonna abolish a couple of them? How many do you still have?
I have something.
There was one I thought that,
I had 6 listed originally.
there was one or two that I thought may contribute to reducing the bond payments, but
School
they're fairly
Repair and
small.
Maintenance Trust says about 280, I'm rounding, it's like 284, 907, but about 285,000, say.
Isn't there a fund
There's a
that has to have the
technology-
town approve using 70 grand for new facilities or something?
Well,
Yeah, the dual purpose, we've expended that.
That was by warrant article last
Yeah,
year.
that one was closed out.
So that one
Right.
was closed out. There was 70,000 and.
But I thought there was some other weird fund that was one where the school board did not have control. It had to be approved in a vote in the town.
Well, there's a technology trust fund, and I'm having the office double-check the original warrants on all these. A capital reserve, the agents to expend generally are written in as the board. And so they just go
I
make a
think
motion
there
to
is,
expend.
you may find one
If it's an expendable
fund.
trust
Yeah.
fund, the way it was set up, then there has to be a public hearing, and the funds can be withdrawn that way. That's the primary difference between the capital reserve and expendable trust. So I'm double-checking to make sure.
Yeah, I think you
When
have
they
one
state
that
on the
requires
paper
one.
like this, School Technology Trust Fund, is it truly a trust fund? And it has $117,000
That's the
in it.
technology?
Yeah. What I can do is send you a copy of the latest report,
Sure.
and then you'll have all of what they are.
Okay, and you
That'd be
still have
great.
the special ed fund?
Correct.
Oh, yes, I didn't know, if 296,000. Utility, there's a utility capital reserve with about 25,000 to offset potential utility spikes and energy costs.
And school repair and maintenance in the, of school trust fund, the fund for expansion of schools.
And then we had another one that was just funded for about 150,000, but
That's
that's been
correct.
expended.
That was also approved by voters last year to pay essentially for architectural and engineering fees to
So-
develop the plan.
And that was the extension of school trust fund. Is that, I got a
No,
punch.
there's the
I have a
expansion of
punch hole.
school. That was the one talking about the $71,000 withdrawal, that we were
That-
using the balance of that up.
That was approved by voters for purchase of the McGrath property last spring.
Right. Town.
Okay, so, but
Expansion
that
of
was,
schools.
that I
That
think was
still
the one that
exists,
needed
it's just no
voter
money in it.
approval, so that's already been done.
Yeah.
Okay.
That still exists, but there's no money in it.
Yeah, just small balance.
Okay.
$100.
Okay, so the only one you really got rid of was the dual purpose fund. So we still have
Yes,
1, 2, 3.
that officially
So we still
was
have
on a
5.
warrant to close.
And it sounds like the school expansion fund is pretty close to zero, or It may be
Yes.
alive technically, but not with cash.
So you're really running off of the school repair and maintenance trust, and then a bit in that utility, but it has to be used for that specific purpose, so.
Now, if you decided to do something like this, you know, these two that you have the two, the one warrant article basically broken down to two separate CIP requests.
Buildings,
How would that work when you got the monies? How would you apply? Would you just prioritize where the money would go?
It will be treated as one project, so.
Yeah.
I just did it based on percentage across the total.
Yeah.
So you've probably seen a number of times the 38 million. And
Right.
it's split between the two buildings, so that's really what I did. Trying to get an idea. Could have done it on one sheet, but I also was trying to portray the two different aspects of it. Because each building has their thing.
Yeah, okay. So, I don't know what would happen if the warrant article doesn't pass, and is this the best route to go, is to approve these two the way they are, or?
And this is just my opinion, I don't know if Meredith and Lisa would agree,
Trust
but assuming the warrant article doesn't pass,
Uh-huh.
they don't have if this doesn't pass warrant article, give me $1 million to do the fire and life safety, that's not there. So if I understand their financial structure, they'd be left in the lurch for the next year. And they'd have to propose a warrant article for the following budget year to cover the fire, life, safety, 3 or 6 things to say those are immediate. And then they'd probably have to be authorized by the town in a vote to start engineering fees again on taking what didn't get approved and trying to break it down into 2 or 3 bonding issues over time, depending on the priority. I mean, in their view, all the work still needs to be done. If it's not approved in this warrant article, then we're gonna have to spend the next 2 or 3 years of replanning how to phase it in over a 5, 7, 10-year period with 3 bonds or something like that.
I have a question. Do you have the ability to have a special town meeting?
what I was
Like
just gonna
municipalities have,
If it's an emergency.
if it's an emergency or it's a
Right.
critical situation?
They could do that.
Well,
for
like
life
the
safety.
boiler.
Correct.
So
If
I'm
we
thinking
had-
the
if-
life
if
safety
the-
issues
if the
might
boiler
qualify for that.
failed, you know, and we were in need of closing school, because we couldn't
Yeah.
heat the building,
There are other
that's
options.
a potential reason to call that, but
And
it's
we
not-
don't have the funds, so we would perhaps, if we didn't have the funds, then that would be the
You'd have
emergency.
to have
Not necessarily that the boiler failed, that you don't have the cash flow, the funds, to have that, you have to have Department of Ed approval, you have to go to the courts. It's a major thing to have an emergency expenditure. And we hope.
But it is a possibility if you ran into a problem.
Can I have a question,
Oh, it always is.
Roseanne?
Yes.
Are the warrant articles at this point in time set?
So there's a proposed warrant article, the bond hearing is tomorrow night. You know, the warrant article basically says, you know.
It's just for the
No,
two.
Voter
Are
authorization.
all the warrant articles at this point in time set?
They've
Is there,
been proposed.
is there an option to have an additional warrant article?
So there was, the deadline for voter petition, I believe, is today.
Yes, generally the
Or
day before.
yesterday. I believe it was yesterday,
I knew it was
January 10th.
either a day or
Um,
so before the public hearing is tomorrow, and then it goes to deliberative.
Correct. So deliberative session, you can't add warrants, you can
No.
amend existing warrants.
So there is no potential at this point in time for a warrant article to say in case.
Correct.
And no guarantee that that would be passed either, for that matter.
Well, no,
I mean-
none of it's a guarantee that any
So-
will be passed, but I'm
so-
saying as a backup, I am questioning why that was not put in.
Well, I think because, I mean, we did have some discussion about that, you know, that 283,000 that exists in the capital reserve could be looked at sort of in a similar way that we approach purchase of the modulars. You could potentially look to do a financing structure to be able to address that immediate need, and $283,000 payment is
enough
is
to
a
get-
good chunk to get us to deal with, if we had an emergency boiler need as probably the most costly example I could provide you in the short term.
Okay.
But then you may also have to have one that says, and I think that's where the discussion got a little crazy on it, you want to have, if this is defeated warrant article, then vote on this warrant article, and you're not going to know whether you're defeated, and does that defeat the whole cause of putting in a trigger warrant article?
And our review with Department of Revenue Administration doesn't allow that for exactly that reason, right? It doesn't allow voters to have accurate information kind of in making that decision, right? An if-then clause isn't how they allow us to ask voters to make a decision.
Yeah, if I remember right, you can't have a warrant that says the money's expendable if this other one doesn't pass. It either is expendable or it isn't.
Right, if it's defeated,
And in the order they come to,
Yeah.
so
if it's defeated, then give us a couple $1 million over here.
if
to-
this, then that.
You can't say that.
You can't have a
You can't do
contingency
it.
plan.
Which would be perfect to say,
Yeah.
and then, but I think one of the reasons is that everybody would say, oh, here's one for 39 million, here's one for 2 million. I recognize what the gap is, but I'll worry about that another year. And everybody would run out and say, let's vote for the 2 million and not have all the other things done. And
Now, also, do you have what the tax increase would be if,
For the bond.
no, for the, I think you already, it would be 350, you're going to go with the 30, level, was that level of principal?
That's level.
That was the level, 315.
debt,
Yep.
First year is $1.60,
$34.
$1.34? Okay,
Or $1.33.
okay. But that's because that's for interest only the first year, and then it goes to 315.
Correct.
But if that didn't pass, then you have between the 1 million, almost 800,000 each year for the capital reserve, and then a little over 600,000. That comes to about almost 2,500,000. Now, what would that be, what kind of tax impact would that be?
That's the 315 per year.
No, I'm saying with these two, if it didn't pass, you wouldn't have, because you're only putting this allocated dollar amount aside each year for CIP
Right?
with this.
And that is the $3.15.
So if it doesn't pass, we'd be coming back
Oh,
to
yeah,
you
we-
because we'd have to recalculate that based on how we break these
Oh, yeah, it would be a
projects up
different
across
amount.
the buildings. It would clearly be different.
Right, but what I'm getting at is this money here to be put aside each year, the CIP.
That's based on
That's
the
to-
bond.
That's the debt service to retire the bond, if the
Oh,
bond is approved
okay.
at the town
If
meeting.
it's approved,
Is that correct?
okay.
that wasn't based on
I
particular
misunderstood.
projects, that was just taking,
Right.
that was just taking the two school proposals, dividing them by 30 or whatever, what percentage?
Yeah.
About 25% elementary, 75% junior, senior
Yeah.
high. And that was part of what we worked through with Diane, just sort of, okay, how do we best explain this is where the investment goes over that time period?
Okay. And this is without interest?
That includes that
that
interest.
That includes the interest?
Yeah.
And that's based on the,
$3.15 per
$3.15.
thousand level debt.
and what is the interest rate that you're working with?
Four
So-
point-
So we
4.25?
we've filled in at 4.25 based
Yeah.
on estimates that we received from New Hampshire Municipal Bonds Market, or Bond Bank, excuse me, which again, no commitment has been made to bonding. We can't do that without approval, and the board's gonna have to look at what options are available. We mentioned, I think at your last meeting, the U.S. Department of Agriculture loan program, which is one piece that we're looking at. They don't do the whole bond amount, they do a 65%. We would have to bond the other 45% through a different mechanism, but if we were able to fund the 55% through them, if funding remains available through them, and, there's a whole list of
There's a
ifs
lot of-
related to that, but their interest rates would be lower.
Okay.
And they also have a no
Prepayment.
prepayment penalty, which is an attractive option should any state aid become available, or should the town's valuation increase. I mean, this is based on current valuations, locking in at an interest rate of 4.25. It's all speculative, in a sense.
Didn't you say that the interest rates are going up? And
They've gone up.
They've gone up
Yeah,
since you
yeah.
started this.
Yeah,
so
we're in
I thought
a-
You said 5.25, maybe?
No, well, 4.25 is what,
That was up from like 3%, though, about 5 months earlier.
that's correct.
And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but if anybody hasn't noticed what the news is over the last few days with presidential transitions and all this kind of nonsense going on, I would suggest to you from 30 years of financial experience, it's going to be a spooky market for the next 6 months to a year. And whether you think we're pulling out of a recession, which personally I'm not so sure of, and whether you can go back in shortly if there's a crisis, we're just in this transitionary time over the past 7 years where the rates have been artificially held low, probably for 10 years now almost. And we may be in the Wild West, we may be in a logical progression, but we're certainly in a moving up rate environment. And I think the Warren article, I learned this year because I was saying, gee, why wouldn't you put in the Warren article how you want to finance this specifically? And the answer came back, I think, that you can't. You have to say it's up to the school board to finance, make that decision, because you have to approve the warrant first for saying we want, if the number's 39 million, and then they have the authority to go out and actually get bids and start to structure all these different
Right.
things. It can't be, we're approving a 30-year bond, because they wouldn't have the power to do that necessarily if the funding authority said, no, we're not going to do that based on these reasons. So you're basically saying, what's the amount of the project, and then leave it to the school
That's what we're
board.
asking the taxpayers, the support to appropriate and
Right.
expend the 38 million in support of the project.
So there's a
And by law,
recommendation.
The board goes out and has the financing approval.
Right, and so the recommendation is to spread it over 30 years if that's the most rational. That seemed to be at the time we made the recommendation, but that could change in the next 2 months. The school board has the
Yeah.
authority to change that.
Now, on the current warrant article, the wording on that, you have the listed, the $1.30,
We have projected tax impact in year one of $1.33 and $3.15 for the remaining life.
for
of
the remaining
bond.
life, so that's both mentioned on there.
And just to be abundantly clear, those two numbers are based on 30-year level debt, 4.25.
Yeah,
Correct.
Okay. Because I know that's going to come up tomorrow night.
Level debt, okay. This one.
Now, is tomorrow night a school board public hearing, a budget
Budget
committee
committee.
public hearing on the school board's warrant article?
At the high school in the gym.
Okay.
So year one was $3,
$1.33.
$1.33.
and
And then it averages about 315. It goes 316, 315, 15, 15. There's a 314 in the middle.
oh, okay, yep, thank you.
That's what's intended.
and it's a total of close to 80 with interest?
Oh, sorry.
Level
69, I think,
principals.
is the number in my
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
69, 767 is the rate.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, one of the other things that I'll just say, and I don't know if Meredith and Lisa have thought about it, if things are a little crazy, and I think they are right now, one of the key things is going to be the differential between a 20-year rate and a 30-year rate. I think when we originally looked at this 6 months ago on the facilities committee, and I'm going to make up numbers, but just for relativity, there may have only been a 70 or 75 basis point difference between 20-year and 30-year. And now there's maybe 130 basis point difference between 20-year and 30-year, which is one of the reasons why I think we need to revisit, as all this happens, is 20-year better than 30, or is 20, where are the spreads? And right now, it's being estimated based on the advice of 30 years, but now that I see the spreads widening, I don't know if that's the sanest thing.
Right, and we don't know what they will look like in March.
Right, the 39 million is the constant. How that gets financed and what's the best deal at the time between USDA and this source, and rates at 30 years versus 20 years, I hope certainly the school board, and I know I'll be mentioning
Yeah.
it, should be reevaluating that once we
Yeah,
know
'cause
what the
you'd-
decision on the warrant article.
You'd save around, what, 5 or 6 million over the
30
total life of the, from a 20-year to a 30, and you would probably end up adding around 30 cents more per thousand, be from 315 to like
It was
345.
363, I think, when we had the bond bank run the numbers.
363 it would come to, not 345, okay.
But it's widening.
And do they have a prepayment penalty with the 20-year?
You don't have an option to prepay, but the bond bank does make every effort to refinance when the market is favorable for that, and then the community reaps the benefit of that.
It's a fixed rate
It is.
with the 20? They're all fixed.
They're all
Everything's
fixed.
fixed.
The
At the
alternative,
time of the sale is when it's determined. So this is their conservative estimate of what it'll be come June when they sell it.
Okay.
So, and these were based on the current market in November 14th is when they
And they haven't
looked at
revised
it, and they haven't
those as of
revised.
this
So
I
they
don't-
have
check with them.
consultants that work with them to determine what's a conservative estimate to provide to all these communities looking to finance.
I don't
And then
think
when we all
anybody's
go
anxious to do
it's-
that right
It's
now.
one rating that goes out and gets sold, and
Yeah.
then from there, whatever, it could discount from there, so.
All right. So, what do I hear from the board? Do we want to have a vote on these two
Sounds
items?
good to me.
I think they've come a long way in providing a
certainly.
longer view of what their capital needs are. So for satisfying, have they satisfied the CIP committee, and that they're doing the CIP, I feel comfortable. To me, if the warrant article passes, I think we have a plan and we'll continue down that road. If it doesn't
Yeah.
pass, I think it's going to be an interesting next year on
Yeah.
how do you take alternative two and start to piece it together.
Now, is a lot of this based too from Cape Elizabeth as to the procedures, well, not so much the procedures, but just the,
Cape Elizabeth.
No.
Where
The,
This
In
is
where
what
Meredith
sense?
used to work.
yeah, that, where Meredith used to
Right.
work,
Right,
yeah.
but this is-
Yeah. You know, with the facilities coming in and all this other stuff, I mean, is that going to be adding a lot more expense to the school, or?
So the school, so let me try to answer your question, and please repeat whatever I'm missing, but, so I was hired back in January or February of last year. During the interview process from a variety of stakeholder groups, I was asked about sharing services with the town. I had experience doing that. There was a shared services subcommittee comprised of 2 town councilors and 2 school board members that
Yeah.
were already meeting. There was a meeting, I believe, in April, I'm looking to you, that took place in this room.
Yeah.
Between the board and the council talking about sharing of services. So in the sense that there's discussion about sharing services, it predates me, but I have some experience with that I've
From where you
tried to
came from.
bring to bear.
Yeah.
However, really the determinations about, is this job description the job description we want, what do we need, that's come from your town administrator, the town councilors who are part of the shared services committee, the board members who are part of that shared services
Yeah.
subcommittee. You know, this piece, I mean, the facilities project has nothing to do with that. It's looking at Newmarket's facilities and what the needs are here. In terms of having a facilities director, I think that's the reason, part of the reason that Newmarket's facilities have gotten to the stage that they have, and we've had great head custodians in both of our buildings over a long time
Yeah.
who do an excellent job of doing their very best to take care of the facilities, but they do not have the expertise and background in taking a long view, that higher level view of how do I project forward what I'm going to need in the next 20 years? Do I have that expertise in heating and plumbing controls?
Right.
That piece, I think, has been lacking, and so they don't have the expertise to write RFPs, you know, or,
Well, because I know I tried to watch part of that, when was it MRI? MRI was there. And I guess basically the council approved The council
They
approved
the formation of a new department.
of a new department,
Yeah.
which wasn't what MRI had recommended, basically.
But it also doesn't reflect what Cape Elizabeth had. Cape Elizabeth had a facilities department with a facilities director. Public Works oversaw buildings and grounds. So, Steve's proposal and his input into that job description was based very much on the needs of Newmarket and his
But
needs.
I thought that the job description for the facilities director for our town was basically based on the same application from
I certainly
Cape
provided the
Elizabeth.
drafts to the Shared Services Subcommittee when we met originally, but those committee members and Steve and I both made additions and changes to that
Yeah.
that reflected Newmarket.
So basically, as a counselor, were you in favor of changing what the consultants that the town paid for, their recommendation, and going against that? Not to go against, but not agreeing with them?
I was in favor for the town administrator making a decision based on what he thought was best for the town.
Chair, I think we may be drifting off CIP.
I know, I know.
So
it
yes,
has nothing to
I
do,
was
but
in
it's
favor
just
for
like-
a
Get
new-
us in any more hot water than we usually
Okay.
get in.
All right. Okay. So do I have any motions? If everybody's done with their comments and,
I
A
don't-
lot of
Diane,
work
what
for
do
a
we need?
facilities person,
Well-
that's what I have to say.
Okay, last year, the committee decided to endorse the proposal that the school board and administration came forward with, and that was reflected in the minutes of the CIP committee. I have worked with former CIP committees that would endorse proposed warrant articles because they felt it was in keeping with the long-term capital improvement needs of the department. So I really think it's up to the committee.
Okay,
You know,
well, but-
each town department, we did approve, and of course, everything that we do is a recommendation.
But I
and
mean,
we'll be
nuts
good.
and bolts, do we need 2 approvals, or are we just
I would-
approving a package, or?
I think it's one.
I would say I would
We may
look
be
for
in
one
an-
approval of what's presented here.
We may be in a place where I don't know if we've been before, because I don't think we've ever approved a warrant article in CIP.
Not
Yeah.
this CIP, but former CIPs did.
Okay.
On a regular basis, they would endorse warrant
Gotcha.
articles.
And I thought there was another part where we at least had to vote that they fulfilled their obligation for the CIP plans, so they could use the fees or
Impact
whatever that we
fees,
put
and-
away.
That's the whole
Um,
point of this,
Right.
is the impact phase.
Right.
but basically, if the warrant article doesn't pass, they don't have a CIP and they're not entitled to impact fees? Is that how
Well,
that
no,
would
I'm
work?
saying, I think they fulfilled to the CIP committee, both in spirit and practice, that they're consciously aware of CIP and the capital improvements and have shared that with us. So for them fulfilling that obligation, I feel they absolutely have and can continue to partake in using the impact fees. As a separate issue, I haven't been involved before in having the CIP committee, on the budget committee I have, saying, yes, we agree with the warrant article, no, we haven't. I haven't been involved in that in CIP.
But you can, I mean,
But we can, and I
that
hadn't
would
even
go
thought
on
of that,
record
to be
and
quite honest with you.
could be perhaps considered by the budgetary people as they move forward with the warrant articles. But yes, indeed, we have a 6-year plan for capital improvements for the elementary school and the senior and junior high school. And it's
So can we
been
at
very
least-
well documented, and I personally would think that, you know, we'd be in a position to recommend this and move forward with it.
Okay, so we should vote on, at least on fulfilling the CIP obligation, not the warrant article.
Right.
That's up, and
So
that's up to
one
you.
piece,
Yes,
And then if you want to open the other piece up for discussion, I
good.
think we can.
Yeah,
if people feel prepared to make that call at this point.
so Dan's ready to go.
All right,
Motion?
Motion to approve the capital improvement plan as put forward by the SAU. Don't anyone fall over themselves to second.
I'll second.
Second.
Russ Simons,
Dan,
Third.
and that was in order to,
And that's just
That's
to
They
to
fulfilled their
accept,
to
obligation.
fulfill.
to accept this
Fulfill
as
the
their
CIP.
6-year capital improvements plan in fulfillment of the town's requirements.
okay.
what she said.
Motion made by Dan, seconded by
Russ.
Russ? Okay. And any other discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all in favor? Okay.
Diane's question is another one, and I don't know, as chair or whatever, do we want to bring up whether we want to vote or not vote? And whether we have that responsibility on the warrant article?
In years past, the CIP committee has taken a position on individual town meeting warrants.
Town.
Does it-
Town, for
Yeah, for
the
town.
town of Newmarket.
Yeah. I think,
And that's up to you.
I would
if you
feel more comfortable
doing
not.
that. If not,
I would
that's
feel
fine,
more
too.
comfortable not.
I mean, my thought is I'd probably abstain because I get my vote tomorrow night, so.
Yeah.
I really, whatever else anyone else would like to do is fine, but.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, I would rather not have voice an opinion on that.
First, I'd have to
Why
think
is
of
that?
whether I abstain or not,
Yeah.
because I'm a member of the Facilities
Right.
Committee.
Yeah,
And one part of me says, gee, I'd like to do it because I believe in the warrant article. On the
No
other
kidding.
hand, as a member of both CIP and the Budget Committee in the past, when the last warrant article came for the new school, CIP had nothing that it said on the warrant article for the school. It
Yeah.
only commented on the
Yeah, we
warrant
didn't say-
article for the town.
yeah,
And, I could talk out of both sides of my head on this one, but at this point, I wouldn't want to set a precedent where people can say, where were you 2 years ago when the warrant article came out in the school that divided the town and you were
Exactly.
silent?
yeah.
And now you're jumping in on this one. I just,
I agree. I think it's more of, there's a lot of
I have a
conflict either
personal
way.
opinion, it probably should be
Yeah.
pretty obvious, but I'm
Yeah.
not comfortable about trying to push to break that ground here. It sounds like you're in this.
Yeah. Okay,
It's
so,
just advisory.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
There's
something
nothing
to
but
think
binding
just the
about.
about
same,
it,
I'd
but
still,
It's up to the committee.
yeah,
That's not disappointing to you, but at the last minute, I just don't
Yeah.
want to change a process.
I
Judy?
believe that, I agree with Roseanne and Russ that we should leave it as it is, let the town people vote,
yeah,
and the meeting tomorrow night, which you will vote on.
yeah.
And it's not up to us to
All
do
right.
it.
Okay, so we are done, I believe. Anything
Yes.
else to discuss with the,
I think we've
In my
covered our
mess here.
agenda. We have
recommendations, other business? I don't think we have any other business before us. Except that if the warrant article doesn't pass, we'll be sitting down talking again. Yeah.
I did want to mention that I've made copies of the town CIP. I'd like to amend this and include in this document the school CIP
Okay.
that the committee just voted on.
So you could do just an extra
Addition.
sheet that we can
Addition.
attach?
Yes, and I think, Dan, you had mentioned that it would be nice to kind of memorialize this and have a signature sheet. And I'm happy to do that, but maybe we could agree to have, sometimes when the council approves resolutions, they have an area in the administrator's office
Yeah.
where they can come in and sign. Would you like to do that? Can I count on
add-
everybody to come in and
If it
and
adds
sign
something,
it?
sure.
And we can
Is
include
that-
it as a cover sheet to the document?
If it's a useful part of the process, we've all
think we've
sweated
done it
enough
before.
blood and tears.
Huh?
I'm willing to sign off.
We've never done that
We've
before.
never done it before, but Dan had mentioned it, I think, last year. No?
I-
You don't
It
remember?
might have been a moment of brilliance that I've just slipped my mind.
That's a whole
but-
year.
We do this for the planning board when we adopt, master
Yeah,
plan
yeah.
changes.
Yeah,
Can
well,
I ask if we're going to include the school, and I don't know if Meredith or Lisa wants to clean this up in some way, but I thought this was a useful way to talk about immediate priorities if the warrant article didn't pass and things that weren't covered. So I'd just like this sheet either in its current form or,
Can I ask for maybe a brief paragraph to sort of introduce it?
The cover sheet?
Yeah.
With-
No, well,
Just
we didn't do a cover sheet
So
for
it
the
doesn't
town.
just
I
sit
don't
there
see
as a
why-
list.
what does it mean?
No, I'm
this
just,
one
what is this
just-
a list of? I mean, you can just put it in the report, but
Yeah.
just looking at a list doesn't
Oh, I
necessarily
see what
mean
you mean.
anything.
If you
So
want
I'm
to
just
say
saying
that
for the
Nudnik
reader, what
Russ
this
asked us
is.
to do this, and so here it is, feel free.
And I'll work with
How do you spell that?
Yeah.
That's my New
Excuse
York
me,
background,
did we,
perhaps.
excuse me, did we just jump, you had mentioned a cover sheet with Dan.
Okay,
And then we
that was just
jumped
for
to-
signatures.
Okay, and then we jumped to this. So we didn't finish discussing the cover
Right.
sheet.
Okay.
So let's go back to that. We have never done a cover sheet. We didn't do a cover sheet for the school, for the town,
Okay.
and so I don't think we should do one for the school.
This would be for both the towns and the schools.
For the
But that's
town
up to
and
you. I
the
mean,
school.
This document with the amendment.
Yeah. Similar,
They're
would-
all
Okay,
in the front
okay.
there? Are
it
they?
would just be a cover sheet recognizing the efforts put
Okay,
into this
okay,
process by
so-
the committee
All
members,
right, so
and
for
they can
both.
sign it. and-
Okay.
So it would be for both. I mean,
All right,
for our
good.
CIP, which is
Okay.
a recommendation.
I know,
To the
don't,
parties
yeah,
that be-
trying to look,
Okay.
Gives it its official stamp, so.
okay. All right, that's.
Do you have to sign
We
it?
have the town clerk memorialize it.
Do you have to sign
Putting
it?
her gold
You can just make your mark.
embossed seal on
Yes.
there.
Oh, so we don't need a vote on that, we're just, it's a little.
You would like to
little-
do that, is what I'm hearing.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so we could do
Yeah.
that, and then we're going to get a paragraph of explanation on the bullet point.
It's part of the presentation.
As part, and just maybe include it as an appendix.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
it's an invaluable document that can be
Yep.
referred to in the future.
By when? When will we have the paragraph?
What was that? I couldn't hear you.
When will we have the paragraph?
Within the next week. I mean, I don't know how
Yeah.
quickly you need it in order to complete your
Whenever.
work, so.
Within the next
Yeah,
couple
I
of
mean, it
weeks
won't-
is fine.
It's going to take me 3 days to figure out how to spell Nudnik, right? So,
You know, I just think that we had a very valuable discussion, and I think it's
Oh, absolutely.
important, and may
Thank you.
provide some guidance in the future to
Right.
the next CIP committee
Yes,
who grapples with this
Gosh.
issue.
All
Hopefully, we
right.
won't have to, but.
yeah. All righty, is everybody all set then? No other business? Anyone have anything else to discuss? So can I entertain a
I'll
motion?
motion to adjourn for the
Second.
year, hopefully.
All in favor?
I,
Aye. Great. Very good meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
a minute before.
Good job.
I do want to say, I want to thank Diane and Roseanne for this year's work.
You need my signature on anything, just put it in front of me.
Thank you very
As long
much.
as it doesn't look like one of my checks.
Our
It's a
pleasure.
stamp.
I wouldn't be able to do any of this without Diane, let me tell you.